I think suffering doesn't disprove the existence of God.
Okay, then explain this to me. Why did God create parasites?
Well, suffering is one of the oldest philosophical problems that there is for the theist, but there are reasons God might allow it. Human suffering can lead to moral development like courage, compassion, perseverance, and overall moral growth. A world without suffering might also be a world without meaningful freedom.
Sure, but that explains human suffering far better than it does for animal suffering. Humans can develop morally relevant traits. But do you know who doesn't develop moral character during suffering? Animals. A deer being eaten alive by wolves isn't becoming virtuous. A rabbit dying from disease isn't learning how to persevere. Their existence is defined by suffering. And unlike humans, animals aren't even supposed to be rewarded in the afterlife eternally after all of this suffering. So how can you justify this with a perfectly moral and loving God?
Well, as a Christian, I would probably say that we live in a fallen world. Suffering exists because humanity rejected God, and then creation itself became corrupted.
Right, but who came first, humans or animal suffering? Because animals were suffering for millions of years before humans even existed. Predation, starvation, extinction, parasites, that all predates humanity. So how could suffering be the consequence of the fall?
Well, God may have known that humanity would eventually sin. The fallen state of creation, years later, would have been anticipated from the beginning by a being that knows everything.
That doesn't seem very fair. God creates a world already full of suffering because humans will sin later on? How is that justice? And honestly, how is it even free will? If God designed creation around a future event he already knew would happen, then animal suffering becomes built into the system from the very start.
I'll admit that explanation has some problems, yes. But maybe suffering was still necessary for something greater. Evolution, for example. Perhaps evolution was part of God's plan to bring about conscious beings that could freely choose and love him like me and you. But evolution is unbelievably brutal. 99.9% of all species that have ever existed are extinct. Animals constantly are killing each other. Parasites literally consume their hosts from the inside out. And for what? So humans like me and you could eventually emerge? Maybe conscious life just couldn't emerge any other way. Evolution may have been the only viable route of producing intelligent, moral, free will possessing beings. Okay, but even if evolution requires competition, why conscious suffering? Pain has a biological function, right? It signals danger. It tells the organism not to repeat that action. So why require actual subjective agony? Why couldn't animals just act as if they were in pain, but not actually experience suffering? Why does a gazelle or a zebra need to consciously experience terror while being eaten alive? I don't know if that's biologically coherent. Maybe consciousness and pain are inseparable from instincts that would keep us alive and keep animals evolving. But I thought your God was omnipotent. Yes, but omnipotence doesn't mean God can do logically impossible things. Like, for example, he can't create another God or a rock so heavy that he couldn't lift it. That would be not a thing. That's a logical contradiction. The same could be here. Perhaps there are simply no possible world in which evolution functions, free creatures emerge, humans then freely accept God, and there is no animal suffering, or at least far less than we see today. Maybe this world, despite some of its horrors, overall maximizes salvation, which is God's end goal. I find that really hard to believe. You're asking me to believe that an all-powerful God has no better option than millions of years of conscious suffering. No world where animals didn't have to be ripped apart while still alive and breathing. No world where ecosystems weren't built on fear and death. Your omnipotent God seems strangely constrained here, and I don't buy it. Yes, but our perspective is limited. If God does exist, his reasons may simply be far beyond human understanding. Maybe, but at some point, we can't understand God's reasons. Sounds a lot like there are no good reasons. And yet, humans, even you, and me too,
Both of us, despite our differing worldviews, expect and desire the universe to be full of justice and good. Why? Why are we disturbed by suffering at all? If the universe is indifferent to our existence, why do we expect it to be just? Well, no, because I'm offering an internal critique of your system to see if it logically contradicts itself. I don't have to have that in my worldview. But regardless, I know this. If there is a God, I completely don't understand why he would make a world like this. Okay, but maybe suffering is just the cost of a world full of love and libertarian free will possessing beings that can choose him. That's just what I have to think.